Now, there are roadblocks to a strong democracy in Nigeria at all levels of government. Conflict triggered by political competition and communal, ethnic, religious or resource allocation rivalries poses a major threat to democracy. Joining me now are Dakbo Olorunyomi and Uju Agomo to discuss this. Good to have you join us. Let me begin with you, Dakbo. Now, we have, this is the largest or the fourth largest democracy in the world. That's after China, India, and the United States. So where do you think we are now in terms of our democratic and political culture? All right, so Uju, that question, it's for you.
Me?
All right, so Uju, when you look at the fact that we are the fourth largest democracy in the world, that's after China, India, and America, where would you say we are now in terms of democratic and political culture in the country?
Oh, thank you very much. I think with respect to population, then one can say, okay, we need to really ensure that what is needful is done. But again, if you look at democracy as translating to good practices, there's a whole lot that we should be ashamed of as a nation. I mean, when you look at the rates of vote buying, when you look at the quality of the elections in terms of the kind of controversies that come out of, and of course, many of us are all celebrating Edo elections, so which is good. But I think there's quite a lot that we need to do as a people. And I think that's something very critical. We need to ask ourselves, how do we get the processes right? How do we ensure that the processes are right? And what are the values that we want as a people? We must be able to hold our leaders accountable. We must be able to ensure that those who elect are persons who can carry the vision and be able to deliver the dividends of democracy. But I'm sure that no one would say that we are there yet. So, again, I'm saying that this is work in progress, but there's a lot that we need to really do. We need to do quite a lot to begin to change the narrative. Are we talking about the representation of women and youth? That's still a lot to celebrate about. But I think that if we saw what happened in Edo and all that was done, the tunnel processes, for example, that INEC set up, which is in terms of the portal, the result collection portal, that we thought that means if we can invest in a technology and ensure that our legislation allows that to happen, it will help us progress. But beyond that, there's still a lot we need to do as people in terms of the values, how we and the issue about stopping the use of money, the bastardization of the process. You know, if you have to bribe people to vote you in, then that means we would hold them less accountable because they are going to recoup those monies that they used in bribing others to vote them in.
So you have spoken to 3 out of the very many tenets of democracy. So you have spoken about accountability, you have spoken about free and fair elections, as well as representation. But let's stay with free and fair elections. Recently, a lot of people commended INEC for the conduct of the Edo governorship election. It looks like at least we're making some sort of progress in that area. Would you support that claim?
No, certainly I do. And there's a piece of write-up that was done by the INEC Commissioner for Rivers State, and I would really recommend people to read his write-up. And Urban was really clear in the point that he was making. And I think that as we celebrate Edo election, we must also ask ourselves that there's still a lot that we need to do. How do we ensure that this should be the kind of thing we see across? But it's not just about the process. It's about the people. It's about the interference. It's about really how do we make this election the issue around the voice of the people, the power of the people. And I think Mr. President in his speech this morning also alluded to this issue about ensuring that democracy really serves as about ensuring that democracy really serves as government of the people, for the people. So do we really count? And I believe that that is what needs to be actually looked into very seriously. Because if we can ensure that we vote the right people, it must be people who can help move the communities, move the nation, move the states forward. Is it possible that we can do that as a people? Because it really hurts. This is 60 years. And then we look around where Nigeria is, given the kind of persons, the capacity that we have. We've seen our people excel in different endeavors. Should we really be where we are? Can we together reflect? Can we together decide that we don't have any other country other than this? And if we must have this country, we must do the right thing. We must do the right thing as a people.
So you spoke about interference, and you talked about vote buying. A lot of people say that this interference is in multiple phases. For example, the vote buying, which is before the election that you talked about, and then the collation process, which is in multiple phases. At what point do you think that this interference is detrimental to that electoral process?
I think it's in all processes. I mean, from the beginning, start from even where the parties, even in terms of internal politics and processes of the parties, in terms of how they select their delegates, in terms of how they carry on their primaries, in terms, it is a multifaceted process, but I believe that it is not insurmountable. We have to make sure that we work on our legislation. We have to make sure that we address these gaps, ensuring that the Electoral Act is amended in such a way that will help us address this. Secondly, how can we get an ordinary Nigeria to understand that they have a power of their votes? So, an understanding that whatever decision they make, because of the monies that are being given to exchange for having the right persons being voted in, we need to look at it. I think one other thing one would agree with is the fact that there's so much money being pushed towards the issue of buying the votes and influencing those processes means that somehow people understand that there is value in the votes. But how do we ensure that the people will really have their powers and not being intimidated either by violence, either by whatever means, including with money, to take decisions that they ought not to be taken? So again, that interference is all across. It's across the whole divide. But as I said, we need to build a culture, and the people must see that they have a power to vote the right persons, power to hold those persons accountable, so that if you have voted someone and the person is not delivering, for God's sake, let them be able to exercise that power to then replace. So I believe that there's a whole lot of apathy. There are a whole lot of people who should be coming out there to say, we have something to contribute. But they feel that the way the processes are structured is such that it has lack integrity, and they are not sure that they will be able to deliver on what they want to deliver because of the corruption in the process.
All right, so let's talk about
intimidation.
All right, so let's talk about representation. Absolutely. So let's talk about representation, which is what democracy is really about, the people. And some people might say perhaps that's the reason why the National Assembly was set up. But we continue to hear this debate on whether we should have a unicameral assembly or a bicameral assembly. What would you support at this time?
Thank you again for this particular question. I had a first-hand experience. I tested election to be a member of the House of Rep. And through that process, what I saw in the field actually made me to believe that perhaps if we have a way of ensuring that those persons who genuinely are committed in making contribution in this regard, not necessarily for any economic gain, meaning if there be any way you can I don't know how I put it, so that it becomes clear. If the reason people are interested in going into the National Assembly or in going into the State Assembly or local government councils is not because of money. It is because that they believe that they can make input, then that would be useful. So again, I think that as a nation, we have to come to ask ourselves, what will work best for us? We really have to make that reflection and be able to move forward in that regard. Because I feel that there is a disconnect. There is completely a disconnect. So, and that is why continually we're having the wrong persons in the wrong places. So, in other words, it must be such a process that people will all buy in and feel that this can move on. And I certainly believe there's a whole lot that we need to do. And as a people, we need to come and decide what is it that will work for us. What is that will work for us? And then be able to pursue that.
So, but we've had a unicameral assembly before in the country. So when you look at that era where we had the unicameral assembly and now where we have the bicameral assembly, which would you say had worked best for the country?
I'm not sure, given that, it's because in terms of what I'm seeing now and experiencing personally at this stage, because at the other periods, I did not have the life experience. All I know is what I've read. Do you get my point? So I am thinking that what we are seeing now, what I'm experiencing now as a Nigerian, is such that I believe we should not continue. But however, whether I have enough experiential, enough information to say that this is good or this is not good, because I have also heard certain criticism both ways. But I believe that once we look into a process that will ensure that people are not getting into the legislative arm because of what they will gain and earn, and that is not only for the legislative arm. I'm also thinking that we should do the same thing for all kinds of elected positions.
But if I may quickly jump in,
as I'm saying, that
if I may quickly jump in, because you just touched on a very important point. Isn't that responsibility for the people? Because, for example, you have your representative at the National Assembly. He's representing you. In fact, that's the closest person to you in governance. Why don't we see people holding them to account, saying, you are there to represent me, make laws that actually matter to me?
Yeah, but it is easier said than done. And that is why, when I spoke earlier, I started explaining even the choice, the process. If I have bought you over and then you put me there, what other conscience, what other impetus do I have? How do I put it? Can I come in and ask, meanwhile, before the elections, you have settled me? Can I come in and challenge you and say to you, I'm holding you accountable? So it is two ways. It's not only the leaders, it is also the followers. And this has to really do with a cultural shift. Our philosophy must be right. We must, as a people, decide what is it really that we want. What is it that we want? It beats my heart to see the kind of unemployment we're seeing with the youth. Look at the population of our youth. How can you have a youth population that over 30 million plus are unemployed? And yet, we have opportunities to create wealth, to enable these young people to be able to have an enabling platform to create jobs. The government alone, no matter what it does, cannot be able to absorb all the youth that are looking for jobs. So how do we move as a nation? And again, I believe there are quite different things with that. So legislation is one aspect. But the whole notion of agreeing, having an interest, what is indeed our national interest? Mr. President mentioned this point about national interest. And my question therefore would be, do we have a common national interest? And what is that interest that we have all agreed to? Who have agreed? How? How can we ensure that these values are actually entrenched in everything we do as a people? How do we heal? How do we heal the wounds? Healing the wounds of the past is not just by us saying it, but can we even go back? The civil war that we had, has there been a way of properly having a proper reconciliation? Look at Rwanda. certain thing happened in terms of genocide. And they had a process of healing. Because if we can't look at our history and turning it back, we are bound to repeat it in future. And my prayer is that we should not go that way. So I believe that in terms of democracy, it gives us a lot of opportunity. But that opportunity must be opportunity that we as the people must buy into and key in. And I agree with you, it is not just a question of the leadership, it is also a question of the followership. So how do we ensure, whether it's in our civic education or in whatever way, that the young person understands that he or she has something to give in making the country, building the country to the kind of way we would like it. That the leaders also understand that we have no other country except this. Because we will all come to this world, pass by, what is that we are living back? And that's why I'm saying, at the moment, it looks like politics is so commercialized. It looks like politics becomes a trade, becomes where people go to make money. But if people are using that as a way to do what? Give something back, maybe it will change. Because I believe there's a lot that Nigeria can do to really be the leader in Africa. We are so gifted. We are so endowed.
Right.
Natural resources, human beings. So why are we getting it wrong?
All right. Would you, Agomo, we see how passionate you are there. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you very much.